minutes to react.
The House of Lords has delayed the government's Rwanda bill until next week. MPs overturned last night's attempts by peers to dilute the plan, but the Lords have now put forward even more changes. A paranoid schizophrenic who set 2 men on fire as they left mosques has been given an indefinite hospital order. Mohammed Abka attacked the worshippers in Ealing in West London and in Birmingham. And the Garden at number 10 Downing Street is going to join 100 others at an open weekend. 2 groups of 24 people picked by ballot will get tours on Saturday, June the 8th. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 27 points at 78.48. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.17.
LBC Weather.
With Ripple Energy. Climate action you can be proud of.
Rain and drizzle in Wales and the far southwest tonight. Temperatures down to 1 degree. Some sunshine tomorrow and a high of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 1 minute past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. In the studio with me to answer your questions are Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow; Luke Tryl, UK Director of More in Common, which is a think tank which aims to tackle social divisions, and he's also a former Conservative advisor. Next to me on my left, Lord Tim Razzall, Liberal Democrat peer, party treasurer under, I think, Charles Kennedy, am I right? Ashdown as well. You go back that far.
I do.
Goodness me. And also Rachel Maclean, who is Conservative Party Deputy Chair or Chairman. Chairwoman, Chair?
I don't mind.
You answer to anything?
Yes, usually, yeah.
For women, she's also MP for Redditch. Lots to talk about tonight on the programme. Get your calls coming in 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp on the same number, text 84850, or say Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And we'd love it if you could watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Well, let's go to our first call. It's from Chris in Stubbington in Hampshire. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian. If smacking stroke corporal punishment has been illegal in schools for decades, is it time to make corporal punishment illegal in the home?
Right, let me just repeat that because it's a bit of a bad line there. If smacking has been illegal in school for decades, isn't it time to make corporal punishment in the home illegal too? Now, the government has rejected calls from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health for smacking children to be banned in England and Northern Ireland, as it is already in Wales and Scotland. Tim Razzall.
Well, I come from an education, because I'm a lot older than anybody else on the platform, when people were still at my school, fortunately not me, were being beaten by a cane. So I do come...
I got the slipper.
Well, yes, but you're younger than me. But so I come from a world in which I was used to people being beaten, and I was appalled by it at the time. And I'm still appalled by it. I'm very glad it was made illegal. And I have some sympathy with the view, which I gather in 2 of the other 4 countries has been the case, that it should be illegal in the home as well. I think corporal punishment should be banned, and I think we should change the culture, and that should be part of it. I do understand the difficulty, of course, the police enforcing it, etc., but I still think that would be a sign, and the change is necessary.
What about parental rights here? There will be parents listening who think, well, I am the best arbiter of how to bring up my child. I don't need the state to intervene. Thank you very much.
I do understand that argument, but on the other hand, it is the child that is damaged, not the parent. So I'm not in favour of allowing parents to think, smacking somebody is a good thing.
The other argument is that there are already laws, people say, which render this needless, in that if a parent already smacks a child and it leaves a mark, that is tantamount to child abuse, if not child abuse. And so existing laws can cope with that.
And how many cases are there of prosecution for that? I doubt there are very, very, very few. I think, like a lot of these changes in behaviour, passing the law changes our culture. I can do all sorts of things, starting with equal marriage, going through rights of gay people, all of which attitudes have been changed by changing the law, and I think this would be an opportunity to do it.
Rachel Maclean.
I think this is the wrong way to look at the issue. Of course, we all care about children and protecting children. I used to be a minister in the Home Office, and safeguarding was my responsibility for children and young adults. And believe me, that is a frightening world to get into when you see some of the things that people are capable of, and you ask, how on earth can someone do that to their child? But by keeping that in mind and remembering this is a highly emotional issue, the right way of dealing with this emotional issue is not just the knee-jerk, we must ban smacking. I mean, Iain, you rightly said that there are already very strict laws against injuring or harming children in this country. I'd like to see more prosecutions, and that's why we put more resources into the police and we put more resources into the agencies, and we've passed a number of laws to protect children since we've been in government. But the idea that you can just suddenly ban smacking and say, job done, that's just the wrong way of looking at it.
Well, they have done in Wales and Scotland.
Well, is there any evidence that that's made children safer? I don't know. I mean, I'd be happy to be proved wrong, but I haven't seen it. I mean, obviously, if I'm going to advocate for a policy, I need to see the evidence that it's actually worked before we just start passing laws.
It would be interesting to know, and I haven't got the figures on this, but it would be interesting to know how many cases there have been in Scotland and Wales. I think it's only come in the last couple of years anyway, so maybe it's a little bit too soon to judge. Stella Creasy.
So I think three observations. Firstly, I would actually disagree with Tim, because it's very rare to meet a parent who has ended up hitting their child who doesn't regret it, who doesn't feel, actually, it was a situation where I ended up losing control. Secondly, I've got two small children. The idea that if one of my children hit another kid, the way that I would teach that child not to hit would be to hit them doesn't make any sense to me. And then thirdly, I think it goes to Rachel's point. Yes, absolutely, we have safeguarding laws, but one of the reasons why the Royal College of Paediatricians are saying, actually, we just need to put this beyond doubt, is the evidence of the harm to children, that actually it's very difficult for people to understand where those boundaries might be. And there is overwhelming evidence that children who were hit by people in their lives suffer more mental health issues. So yes, I absolutely think it's the right, and I think most parents would agree, because as much as you can talk, actually we had corporal punishment at my school, maybe that tells you how old I am. We have moved on. Bless you, I feel it. But we have moved on, and rightly we've moved on. And the idea that I could smack you in and you could report me to the police, but I smacked one of my kids and that's completely normal.
I'm not a child.
Right, exactly.
Usually.
So you probably have an ability, and maybe, you could fight back. These are children, and we're somehow creating a loophole where behaviour that we wouldn't accept between adults.
How old are your children? They're quite young.
My children are 2 and 4. Absolutely, it's incredibly frustrating. But as I say, most parents, when you talk to them, the points at which they've ended up, and it's very rare now. That's the other thing I'd say. So I think it just is a cultural change, and it's the good cultural change, because people recognise there are other ways that you can discipline, challenge and give children consequences when they behave in ways that you're trying to change. So I think this is actually probably something I think the overwhelming message I've had from people today is they were gobsmacked that it was still legal.
Do we not have to differentiate between smacking and hitting? Because to me, a smack is something that is not as serious as a hit. If you hit a child, that implies a lot of violence. If you smack a child on the back of the legs, your intention is to shock, I suppose, because the child is presumably doing something very naughty.
When have you done that to a child, Iain?
I've never done it to a child, because I'm not a parent, and I wouldn't do it to somebody else's child.
So being able to draw that boundary, as I say, is... And
I don't think there is one.
And even if I smacked you on the back of your legs, that would be assault. So why do you have a protection that my kids don't?
Because children, we can only judge from our own experience. And I wasn't smacked very often certainly I was never smacked by my father. If I ever was, it was by my mother. And I think that's quite often the case. But it was the humiliation of it rather than the pain that would stop me from doing something.
Humiliating a child is how we teach them to behave better. That just isn't the way that I think...
Particularly when you have your trousers taken down in front of your friends. That's happened to me.
Right, and now everything you're talking about, probably a social worker would want to look at. So things have rightly moved on.
Now makes sense.
Actually, Rachel's like, no, that would be an issue for safeguarding. As I say, I don't, parents are stressed out. It's really difficult. I tell you, 2 toddlers is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I've never, for avoidance, I've never hit my children. I never would hit my children.
Have you ever have you come close?
Let me finish. I've been in the point where I've had to go and stand outside myself to regulate myself, because it is really difficult. But as I say, most parents, I've never met a parent who actually says, I hit my child, it was absolutely the right thing to do. Right. I would do it again. Well, you meet a lot of parents who say, I was at the end of my tether. I really, really regret it. Of children, older children, younger children now, it's a very culture, and rightly so. And when the paediatricians are saying, this is really bad for kids,
right.
Like, why would we say, oh, fine, we've not got a problem with that? Like, they are experts.
Should we go to the undisputed youngest member of the panel, Luke Tryl?
Oh, now you're going to get a smack.
Look, I spent time as a special advisor in the Department for Education, working at Ofsted. If I were to invest or to bring in new powers on child safeguarding, it wouldn't be this. I think there is a lot more that we can do to improve child safeguarding at the really hard edge. I'm not sure that this type of ban would achieve anything other than a sort of symbolism. And interestingly, if you ask parents, if you poll parents on this, they tend to think that the current law, that balance where we say, and it is a difference between hitting or smacking a child, where you can't leave a mark, gets it about right. You can see this would just bring, I think, the state into the home in a way which I don't actually think is that healthy for family dynamics. I think the current law gets it right. I think there's a lot more we can do to help vulnerable children. I don't think a smacking ban is the way to achieve it.
Are there any votes in this? Because I can't think anybody would change their vote because of it.
No.
But is there anybody who actually wants to hit their children?
Nobody does. Nobody
exactly.
does. Nobody wants to hit their children.
Well, you didn't leave a mark. You have left a mark. That's exactly what the paediatricians are saying. You've left a mark on their mind. They're frightened of you. That isn't the way to get a child to learn that their behaviour isn't appropriate.
But you're not there to be the child's friend, are you?
No. This is not about, nobody's talking about parenting being easy. What we're saying is there are better ways and more effective ways to get children to learn than frightening them that you're going to hurt them. Just because it doesn't leave a mark doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
But I think there is a big difference between, and you mentioned, getting frustrated, hitting a child in anger. I think, we can all agree it is wrong and shouldn't happen. There is a big difference, I think, between that and a clip round the ear when, you've run out in front of a car just to teach you a short lesson. I think that's where, it is. The polling evidence shows that's where most parents are. We are moving away from a culture where, parents
your
hit
child
children.
runs out in front of a car and you hit them because that's the way they learn not to run out, rather than teaching them the highway code. Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of my time standing with my children, sometimes screaming, saying, stop at the road, green man, wait for the green man, wait for the green man. Do I think clipping them round the ear would make them learn
That's what you do to a dog, not a child.
No, but isn't screaming at them traumatising them then? Should we not shout at children? Because that can be, shouting at children can be, verbally traumatising. We have to have, I think we have to trust parents to get the balance right. And in most cases, I think they will do that. There are clearly cases where parents commit abuse. We should deal with that through the system. As I say, I want lots more to be done on child safeguarding. Don't think this is a good use of state.
It's not a good use of resources, because you have to have a new legislative framework, you have to have people to enforce it, you have to have someone to decide what is a hit or what is a touch, and how on earth are you going to do that with a child? It's difficult enough, as people have said, and I'd like to see much more done to help children. And obviously, I don't know what the paediatrician.
It's just changing the culture, though, is my point.
I think we've done that already, though. That's the point. We've all, because of the reaction that you've already articulated, Stella, I think very well. We all agree that it's unacceptable, and we don't choose. By the way, I've had four children within a few years of each other, and
Corey tells me that if we don't go to the break on time, we'll all get a smack.
Right.
But just a final word on this. I have an 11-month-old puppy who's actually a year old on Saturday, Woody, and he's an adorable dog, but like most puppies, he can be a little bit naughty. I don't hit him if he's naughty, but I do tap him on his back to make him understand that that's not acceptable, and he learns from that.
To your dog.
You can
because you can do
to a child.
You can do it with the tone of your voice.
Exactly.
Not really for a tiny child.
And I'm just waiting for the text to say, how dare you compare a dog to a child? They're far more important. It's 8:15.
LBC.
UK.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
Stella, Creasy, Rachel, Maclean. It is Maclean, isn't it?
Maclean, yes, like toothpaste.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's what I used. Luke, Tryl and Tim Razzall with us answering your questions. Let's go to a text question from Vaz in Warwick. Over the weekend, the UK deployed RAF jets from bases in Romania. I thought they were from Cyprus, but anyway, to help intercept over 170 unmanned drones launched by Iran heading for Israel. Why can't we do the same to help defend Ukraine from unmanned drones sent by Russia? Now, Ukraine's foreign minister spoke to Nick Ferrari here on LBC this morning and told him he doesn't accept David Cameron's argument that the UK downing a Russian drone would lead to an escalation of the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the man who was Britain's Armed Forces Minister until only a couple of weeks ago, James Heappey, told Nick that he doesn't think there is a good enough reason why Britain cannot intervene to shoot down Russian drones. Rachel, let's start with you.
What's the specific question?
The specific question is, if we can shoot down Iranian drones, why can't we shoot down Russian ones?
Okay, well, I mean, look, I think what we've got to look at is our overall approach to Ukraine, which has been first among nations. That was started under the previous Prime Minister, and we've continued to support Ukraine through this awful conflict where they've been engaged in an illegal war. Putin, his brutal attacks on those Ukrainian people, and we as the UK stepped up to defend them. Now, when it comes to questions of what drones cannot do, you've got the wrong person on the show. You'd have to get James Heappey back to talk about the technicalities of that, because at the end of the day, these are national security matters that I can't, frankly, opine on. It would just be a waste of my time and it would just be hot air. But what I do know is that we are living up to our international obligations. We've clearly got an evolving situation right now with Iran, with Israel, the Middle East. I've just actually been at a meeting with the Defence Secretary talking about all the work that we are doing as a party to make sure that we recruit and retain and attract people to the armed forces. We are seeing an upsurge of that. I think because there's a lot of interest now. People are seeing our amazing armed forces in action, those RAF jets being scrambled into the Middle East, and they're seeing that, and they are finding that is that call to serve our country. So look, I'm sure these questions of which drones can operate where are for others other than me, but I'm very confident that we are putting the support that's needed. And I think, by the way, on this, we really do have to think about the defence of our nation. it's the first duty of any government, whether it's the armed forces or whether it's that nuclear deterrent. People can see that it's the Conservatives who are supporting that.
Well, hang on.
Put that at
The size of the
centre
army is smaller than it's ever been, and that's happened under your government.
Well, there's obviously changes in the way things are deployed, but if you look at the money that's going in and you look at the kit that they've got and the skills that they've got and the way that they step up and defend our country around the world and keep us all safe as a result of that, that has happened on our watch, and that's happened because of the investment that we've put into them.
Stella Creasy.
It's not actually a question about the technology, though, Rachel, because drones can operate anywhere. That's the point of them. The question is obviously an international coalition of which we were part of took part in defending Israel from the Iranian attack. The question is whether the same thing could be put together to help the Ukrainians, and that's not a technical one. That's a question about.
Well, with respect, it's about the international rules of warfare and the conditions that are there. It's not just about an agreement. It's about the situation that applies in that specific theatre of war.
No, it is about. I think there's an interesting question about whether we're getting to the point where the lines that we have drawn about our participation in Ukraine are being blurred to such an extent that would be the next step. Actually, the most interesting thing about this was Ben Wallace, who got up in the questions we did about this and pointed out that he'd tried to have conversations with the Israelis about whether they would tackle the Iranian drones that were being used in Ukraine. And at the time he'd spoken to them, they had refused to do so. And he was saying, well, he wants to see the government now raising that question with Netanyahu because although these are different conflicts, they are interlinked. But I think the case, the case for looking at what we do in Ukraine is instantly linked with what's happening in America. And until we know what's going to happen in America, and that affects NATO and NATO's contribution. But we should be under no illusions. The war in Ukraine is stalling, and we will be affected by that. So I don't think we can opt out of having a view, Rachel, as to whether or not defending Ukraine from the onslaught of Russia in that way.
This is not me opting out of having a view, to be clear. We are defending Ukraine. We've been doing that ever since the war broke out. We were one of the foremost nations, and because of the action that we took, many other nations followed. When it comes to a question of strategy and tactics about how is that done, these are questions for our armed forces and our armed services.
Do you accept the theory that if we can do it to repel Iranian drones, then all other things being equal, there's no reason why we shouldn't do that to help Ukraine as well?
I just think this is not a question for, with greatest respect to your expertise, Ian, it's not a question for a TV or broadcast studio. These are questions where the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister will be being advised by the National Security Services, by the people whose professional job it is to utilise those assets. Now, if they are having those...
A view.
Pardon?
Well,
you can have a view, of course.
What
What I want to see is our country keeping us safe and working with our allies and
do you think
defending our assets wherever they are in the country.
Do you think that we are safer if we down Russian drones?
Well, ultimately, of course, we will be, but that's just a hypothetical question.
Well, it's not hypothetical to Ukrainians. I mean, they're suffering because we're not doing it.
Of course they are, but we have given them all sorts of other things. We've given them a lot of other kit. Zelensky himself has praised us multiple times for the role that we've played. Of course, everybody is going to think we should do the maximum possible. The reason for that is because it will help us globally. Of course, it keeps our citizens safer if we can defend Ukraine. Of course it does.
Stella, I don't think we actually got you to say whether you think we should be doing this.
What Rachel's, I think, grasping towards is that currently the demarcation is that we have provided materials to Ukraine to defend itself. This would be us directly defending Ukraine. I think that would be a matter for Parliament. I think what you're hearing...
How would you
from
vote?
people...
I don't think it is a matter for Parliament. Because Parliament are not experts in what... I mean, we can have an opinion, can't we? I mean, we can possibly have a debate about it, but ultimately it has to be... These are national security matters.
Surely it has to be for Parliament, though, if it's such a big step to effectively engage with Russian military machines, which drones are, then Parliament has a right to a view. But how would you vote on that?
Putin has been very clear that he would see that as a declaration of war. I think What I would want to see is the evidence being put forward.
Of course we want to see
and I
the
don't
evidence.
think we should act on our own. So I think this would be about whether we could have a negotiation with NATO. But are you asking me whether I think we're going to get to that point? Very possibly, yes. And do I want to see us standing up to Putin? Yes. Of course. And I think, Rachel, we have to be
Well, of course
accountable.
we're doing that. This is the government is standing up to
We haven't
Putin.
heard from our other two panellists yet. Luke?
Well, look, I don't think we got a clear answer from either of the other two speakers, so I will give you one. The West is failing Ukraine at the moment, and on the current trajectory, Ukraine is going to lose, and the result of that is that we will be less safe over here. So we have to totally revisit those red lines we set previously. We've shown that we can help our allies protect their airspace without engaging with combat troops. There is no reason that we shouldn't be doing the same in Ukraine. And it's all very well to say, it depends on the US. We know, the UK can lead on the international stage, and the government has done lots of good stuff with Ukraine on that. But the time has now come for the UK to step up and say to the international community, we are not doing enough, and we need to help Ukraine defend its airspace. Because if we don't, Ukraine is going to lose, and we suffer as a result of that.
But we can't do that on our own, can we? I mean, we can try and lead, but if we said, well, this is what we think should happen, and everyone else runs a mile, it would be surely madness for Britain to act on its own.
Well, I think Britain can provide support on its own, and technical support, and the RAF can provide support, but I actually think part of it is leading on the world stage. It's saying to our allies, we need to do this. We need to help Ukrainian cities and protecting Ukrainian infrastructure. We need to help them build the equivalent of an Iron Dome. And part of it is also doing other things like pushing the US on releasing arms sale, as David Cameron and others are doing. But, if we're not stepping up, if we're not doing this, then Ukraine will fall. And the consequences of that are dire.
Tim?
I agree with what Stella said. Whatever we do needs to be approved by the House of Parliament, which is exactly what happened when we were proposing to do what we were going to do in Syria. The House of Commons voted against it, and it didn't happen.
Which was a wrong vote in retrospect, wasn't it?
Whether it was right or wrong, that is what happens, and that is part of our democracy. But I think the other point Stella made was entirely right. What happened in Israel was part of an international agreement where we were complying with our treaty obligations that we had signed up. That's what we would do if Iran did this. The critical thing in Ukraine is NATO. We don't act alone in Ukraine. Rachel's right in that Boris Johnson rather led the charge as to we need to support Ukraine, but
he did it through NATO.
But he did it through NATO. That's the point. And there are significant arguments going on within NATO, as we know, as to, particularly with the Germans and some of the other countries, as to what extent Ukraine can be armed. And it is a matter of judgment, and don't think anyone around this table is equipped to say, if we started shooting down drones coming out of Russia, whether Putin would take the view that that was a declaration of war by NATO on NATO countries and us. And I have to say, we are not on the front line. The Baltic states are on the front line, Germany's on the front line, Poland's on the front line. So it is a very difficult issue of judgment as to whether, and I don't think we have at this table the information to know what the issues are. Now, where I do agree with you, Iain, the idea that this government has built up our armed forces to keep us safe, as you rightly said, our army is significantly less in number than it was, and we can't use the excuse that we use technology. There are less. Every retired general, everyone who knows anything about it, is calling for more troops to be hired. And if we want to keep the country safe, we're going to have to do that.
Because I think one thing that the Ukraine war has shown us is that traditional warfare is not dead. I mean,
correct.
They've got troops on the front line on both sides.
Correct.
And I think this is where the French have actually not gone down the same route as us. They have not cut their army. No. I think their army is about 115,000, 120,000. I think that's going to be the challenge for whoever forms the next government to get the numbers up to that kind of level. Someone says here, Ian, is this a Conservative Party political broadcast? Well, not when you have a Liberal Democrat peer, a Labour MP. Yes, we have a Conservative MP and somebody who used to be a Conservative Special Advisor, but is now... You're much more independent now,
entirely apolitical. We look at what the public think on the big issues of the day. So
the answer is no. Right, we're going to move on to another very important subject in just a moment. It's 8:30 on LBC. Let's get the news headlines from Daryl Jackson.
Ukraine's foreign minister has told LBC he has new questions for NATO following events in the Middle East. The UK's previously refused to intercept drones from Russia but shot down a number sent by Iran to Israel on Saturday. A man's been sentenced to an indefinite hospital order for setting fire to 2 elderly men as they left mosques in Birmingham and Ealing in West London last year. Mohammed Abka claimed he was being controlled by magic. And the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt insists better times are ahead. It's after a dip in inflation to 3.2%, though Labour doesn't think the Tories can take any credit for it. LBC weather, rain and drizzle in Wales and the far southwest tonight, showers dying out and winds easing elsewhere. A low of 1 degree.
LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Let me reintroduce my very jovial panel to you. Stella Creasy is Labour MP for Walthamstow. Rachel Maclean is Conservative Party Deputy Chairman for Women and MP for Redditch. Luke Tryl is UK Director of More in Common. And Lord Razzall, Tim Razzall, Liberal Democrat peer. Let's go to a text question from James in Chelsea. Even if Angela Rayner has done something wrong, is it going to change the odds for the Conservatives at the next election? Now, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Stephen Watson, said earlier this week that there are a number of assertions knocking about in relation to Labour's Deputy Leader. Well, that was helpful of him, wasn't it? Stella Creasy, this goes on and on and on. Do you think this is having an effect on people's voting intentions at all? Or might do?
I don't think it's having an effect on voting intentions, because I think people take elections and they look at their own pockets. I do think there is a general sense of stench around British politics, and that's really sad, because I'm going to put myself out here and say I will defend Angela to the hilt, because I think she's been battered about, and it's not accidental that they've targeted her in this way. There is now a police investigation. I hope that is going to be put beyond doubt anybody's sense that the matter is being covered up or anything. There'll be a police investigation. She says she hasn't done anything wrong. I believe her. But I do recognise, and it's not because of Angela, but from what Luke's saying, I'm sure he'll talk about it, it's gotten worse. There's just this sense that none of us are in this for the right reasons, and that's really sad. Because actually, I would say across the House there are people I think are very decent people. I just disagree with them on political issues. So when people give up hope that the people who go into politics with the best intentions, I just ask the people who fed this if that's really what they wanted to achieve.
Luke?
Well, the short answer is this is not going to affect the trajectory of the election. People, when you speak to them in focus groups, they're voting on the cost of living, they're voting on the NHS, they're voting on levels of immigration and things like small boats. That's going to determine the course of the election. I do think the way that this affair has been handled, and recognise lots of the attacks have been in bad faith, hasn't been good for Labour. And I think the reason particularly is when you talk about cynicism and trust in politics, actually, when we would ask in focus groups, who is a politician who speaks for ordinary people? There aren't many people they'd come up with. But actually, Angela Rayner was one of them. They would say, she's authentic. She says it like it is. And my worry for Angela Rayner is that this affair takes some of that ability that she had to connect off, hopefully. For her, it won't long term. And I do wonder, as we were saying earlier, had at the beginning she said, look, I'm in a blended family like lots of families are now. It was a confusing situation. Given a donation to a housing charity or such life and just said, look, I may have made a mistake here. I think it would have been easier to move on. So, regardless of the facts of the case, I think the handling has been difficult. But no, this is not going to be something that the election turns on.
Tim Razzall.
No, I entirely agree with the previous two. The election's not going to turn on this. We obviously can't comment on the detail with the police investigating. I'd just make two comments about it. First of all, I think Stella was touching on this, that the people round Angela probably made a significant mistake. If you've got a crisis, one of the iron laws of politics is get all the facts out at the beginning. Don't allow it to be this drip that has now happened, and that was a mistake. Whether there were, if all the facts had come out, the result would have been different. Who knows? But that's what she should have done. And the second thing, I do just feel there's a slight whiff of class warfare about the opposition to her. There are some people, particularly in the Tory party, who clearly think that Angela Rayner is not the right sort of person to be an MP. I just feel nonsense. Well, I'm saying this not as a Tory or as a Labour member. I just feel there's a whiff of that about this, which I find unattractive. And read the Daily Mail if you don't agree with me.
I look. The reason why Angela is in trouble is because. Look, I sat in studios like this over and over again when Partygate was going on, when Boris Johnson was in trouble. He was the Prime Minister, arguably more senior figure than Angela Rayner, but Angela Rayner is a very senior figure in the Labour Party. And at that time, she called over and over again for people like Boris to resign the minute there was an investigation into him. She wasn't interested in the course of justice taking place. She wasn't interested in the independent investigation. She wasn't interested in the police. She said multiple times he should resign. And that was what she said. But somehow, when it's her, it's just because, I've got this arrangement and, my husband lives in one place and my children live in another, so you should leave me alone. It's not fair. Don't have a go at me. And I think that's what people don't like.
That's a fair point, Stella, isn't it?
So hang on, so your argument, Rachel, is the things that you opposed at the time should now happen because it's somebody in a different political party?
No, not at all. No, Stella, no, don't put words in my mouth. I'm highlighting the hypocrisy. She called for that when it was Conservative politicians. This working class stuff is complete and utter nonsense, I'm afraid. We've got plenty of working class people in my party, in fact, probably way more than the Labour Party these days. They've completely changed what they used to be. It's nothing to do with it. It's a pure deflection tactic. What people can sniff is that hypocrisy, because I happen to think that there should be an investigation, and that's fine. There should be a police investigation and we shouldn't prejudge it, but that's what she did when it was Conservatives under investigation. That's the point.
I mean, if we want to get into the social class of MPs, I think what you just said won't stand muster. But
I think it probably will. I'd be happy to look at the stats and take it on.
Sentence?
Actually, we've got an incredibly diverse Conservative Party these days, and the people that vote for us are very diverse.
But very few of them will, regardless of what's happening with Angela Rayner. I mean, that's the evidence.
It's nothing to do with social class, and that's the point I'm making, is that this sort of class war thing is nonsense.
I mean, actually, I think the attacks that Angela has had to put up with, not just recently, but for years, that have come from your party, I can see where Tim is coming from.
Who was calling us a Tory scum? I'm sorry, she is giving as good as she got.
I mean, I don't agree with Tory scum as a word.
Okay, well, that's what she called us.
But it doesn't. I mean, so stand up for your.
I think drink had been imbibed at that.
I think, but I was thinking, I'm
just trying to put it. We all say things from time to time, which may be a little bit over the top. She can't be on the one hand a strong, powerful woman, which, by the way, I think she is. She's an incredibly effective woman, and then on the other hand, it's not fair to attack her. Come on, if you dish it out, you've got to take it.
No, she's. No,
you can't.
Can I finish?
Rachel,
I mean,
come on.
Rachel. She's a strong, powerful MP, actually, and deputy leader of the Labour Party, and hopefully future deputy prime minister. But she has also been very clear that if the police say something wrong has happened, and we all agree that the police are the best, she will stand down. Okay. Now, that isn't what Boris or any of those people who are on investigation ever did. They hid, they obfuscated, they tried to downplay.
And that was wrong, and now they've gone.
Actually, she's shown a level of character under this assault from Lord Ashcroft that I think reveals why, as Luke says, she's so supported by the public. I just hope the investigation can happen quickly and this can all just be dealt with.
Let me just say that as far as I remember, in Lord Ashcroft's book about Angela Rayner, he made no allegations about tax at all. It was purely the electoral roll. So I think it's the Daily Mail that have gone down that road.
In which case, then I apologise, Lord Ashcroft. I hadn't, with the greatest respect, I haven't, because I'm so busy waiting, obviously, having heard your interview with Liz Truss, to be able to read my copy of the Liz Truss book first.
You're so naughty.
So,
you're going to get smacked on your legs in a minute.
And you smack me, and I will, of course, report you to the police because I can.
I know. She would as well. Right, let's move on to a different question. It is a WhatsApp question from Wesley in Gravesend. Can one be left-wing and patriotic at the same time? All I hear is that Conservatives, as right-wingers, are the patriotic ones. Is it patriotic or patriotic? I never know. Stella?
Of course you can. I mean, listen to George Orwell. I'm very proud of this country. I've served this country in lots of different ways. I have different opinions to people in the Conservative Party. That doesn't make me unpatriotic. It means I'm fighting for a different future for this country. What I am really worried about is this kind of Trumpification of British politics, that somehow, if you question a decision, if you say there's a better and alternative future for this country, you are an enemy of the people. If you somehow stand up for the rule of law, if you somehow want to work with our neighbours in other countries rather than attack them, you're unpatriotic. I am passionate about this country. I'm proud of it. It's why I wanted to stand to be an MP. I'm sure Rachel feels that too. I don't think that's a partisan point. But I will never let anybody else tell me that their set of values is what defines what this country stands for. Because as much as you can point to people on the right who may have done that, I mean, it's been a very bizarre thing in the last couple of years where I've been standing up to defend Winston Churchill and the work he did setting up the European Court of Human Rights as a Labour MP, but I recognise and respect what he was trying to get to as a proud British democracy, in the same way that, we can all quote George Orwell.
Tim Razzall.
Yes, I mean, I think I entirely agree with Stella. I don't think if you look at the four Labour Prime Ministers since the Second World War, Attlee, Wilson, Callaghan and Blair, I don't think anybody could reasonably suggest they were unpatriotic. I mean, it just would be ridiculous to suggest that patriotism is the mark of the Tory party. Or somebody said the last refuge of the scoundrel.
That was all.
But I do actually think that one of the many reasons why Jeremy Corbyn lost it as leader of the Labour Party is that he came across as unpatriotic, and you're nodding over there because your focus groups will have told you people thought he was unpatriotic, and there was a scene where he refused to stand up. Was it a Battle of Britain or something? And he was thought to be unpatriotic, and that cost him countless votes. And I think but that was about Jeremy Corbyn, not about the Labour Party. And I don't think Keir Starmer is unpatriotic. I don't think Stella's unpatriotic, and I don't think Angela Rayner's unpatriotic.
Rachel?
No, I don't think it's so much a question of left and right, and I putting Jeremy Corbyn in a slightly different box because he absolutely was unpatriotic. I don't think it's about those viewpoints. I think it is more about the belief in things that are very important to people out in the country, such as the importance of our nation state. Because if you're going to be patriotic, you first have to define what are you defending? What is this nation that you're proud of? And that it is inextricably linked with these questions that we are debating right now. I think your colleagues in the House of Lords are debating right now these crucial bits of legislation which are linked with how do we protect our borders. So what people, when they
I'm
think...
afraid you've lost it,
we will come back again and we'll debate it again. We'll send
You
it
may
back.
have won the battle, but I'm not sure
I don't think you're going to win the law. I mean, look, we are elected to that place, to that democratic institution, to represent our constituents' views, and that starts with defining where our state begins and ends, and standing up for what is precious about it. That the Labour Party can't do that. They want to open our borders. They have no way to tackle this problem of illegal migration, which is the biggest threat to our country, I think, as on a par probably with some of these warfare situations we discussed earlier. So I think we have to see it through that lens rather than this sort of left and right binary choice, which I don't think is that relevant anymore.
And it's to do with individuals as well, isn't it? I mean, somebody's mentioning the Emily Thornberry England flag thing a few years ago, which she's never quite got over.
Sorry, I'm not going to let Rachel get away with suggesting
Well,
that opposition to the Rwanda bill is unpatriotic. The amendment that's going through the Lords tonight is about, one of them is about Afghans who helped our forces. And I have a direct
those people.
Well, you're not.
Yes, we are. Of course, we are
not.
You're refusing to say that they won't be sent to Rwanda.
We are saying that. That's in
no,
the
you're
bill.
Not. Well, why don't you agree with our amendment?
Because your amendment is not what we've already have it in the bill, so we don't need to have things that the House of Lords.
But it is patriotic to stand up for those people who stood up for our forces.
Which is what we are doing.
That, to me, is patriotism.
Which is what we are doing. We are doing that. We just don't do it through this group.
Yeah. There's clearly no tension between being left-wing and being patriotic. They very often go hand in hand. And I do worry slightly about some of Rachel's rhetoric and some of her colleagues that suggest, if you oppose the Rwanda plan, you're somehow unpatriotic and you can't defend an initiative.
So, Luke, how do we defend the country then? How do we defend the nation state?
But Rachel, that is a policy debate about how best we control migration, which almost everyone in this country wants to do. It doesn't go to people's patriotism. I think it's quite deeply worrying to start equating that, just as I think those on the uber progressive left that Tim talked about, who get upset when they see Labour putting out leaflets with Union Jack on. I think that's quite unhealthy as well. I think we should accept that patriotism comes in lots of different forms. We might have big debates about the best way forward for the country, but to attack people's patriotism for disagreeing about the workings of the Rwanda plan, that does worry me. I don't think it's healthy for kind of civil debate.
Well, I'm afraid it is healthy, and if you...
Well, it may be, but we're a bit late for a break,
okay.
Rachel, so I'm going to call it quits if you don't mind, because we have a very important question next, and it's about Liz Truss. It's 8:47.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:48 on LBC. Stella, Creasy, Rachel Maclean, Luke Tryl and Tim Razzall answering your questions. Andrea says, why should we pay any attention to what Liz Truss says, given she was only PM for about 5 minutes? Now, it's very interesting, the reaction to her book and to all the interviews that she's done. Twitter is universally of the view that she shouldn't be given a platform at all and that she should just sort of disappear into the wilderness. Her book is now number 4 bestseller on the Amazon charts, so the general public seem to have a rather different view. Luke?
Well, look, I think it is important that people with different ideas are given an opportunity to talk about them, for them to be challenged by people like you. I think it's a little bit odd, this suggestion that someone who, is unique by the fact that they were Prime Minister for such a short amount of time shouldn't be given a platform to try and explain what she was trying to do, as long as there's also those opportunities for challenge and questioning of it as well. And one of the things which I think is interesting, clearly there's lots that is in the book which I don't agree with, but I think some of the human side of things that come out of the book about what it was like being in Downing Street, some of the challenges are actually quite revealing, and I think the public will enjoy it's another politician giving that chance to go through the keyholes. So I think it's good and healthy and important that she and politicians across the spectrum can set out their stall.
And who knew that there were fleas in Downing Street? Tim?
Well, Liz Truss and I have two things in common, of course. First of all, which people are aware of, she used to be a member of my party, and indeed Paddy Ashdown once sent me to see her to try and dissuade her from proposing at our conference a motion to abolish the monarchy, which she did propose, but it wasn't carried. And Ashdown said, of course, what will happen is the Daily Mail will run that as their front page story, and that'd be the only story from our conference, and Ashdown was right. And secondly, of course, the company you used to run published my autobiography in the same way as they've published hers. So we have two things in common.
Did yours get to number 4 in the bestseller
No, it
charts?
did not.
Not yet.
Sadly
not
not.
yet.
Sadly not yet. But I think as far as publishing her book is concerned, now I have to say I haven't read the whole book. I've only read the extracts that are in the Daily Mail. I think it would be a very good thing if it continued to be published, because the more you read of it, the more you realise why it'd be entirely wrong to vote Tory at the next election.
Rachel?
So before I came into politics, I was in business for 30 years, starting a number of businesses. One of them, actually a couple of them, were in the publishing industry. So I think this is great for British publishing. We are punching above our weight around the world. The English language is fantastic, and we live in a free country. If people want to buy Liz Truss's book with their hard-earned money, which, by the way, they got more of under a Conservative government, then let them do it.
Have you read it?
No.
Have you any intention of reading it?
No, because I've seen the clips of your wonderful interview, Iain, and I had lovely chats with Liz in the tea room, and I feel like...
Do you have to book your own hairdresser?
Yeah, of course I have to book my own
Well, so did she when she was Prime Minister, and she's complaining about
I know
the deep
because
state.
I've seen that on X and Iain Dale's interviews, but I have a very big reading list, and Liz Truss's book is not on it.
Damning with faint praise.
No,
Luke?
I think
Have we done
Have
we done everybody?
Stella's going to go and read it tonight.
No, what I would say, look, of course, she was a Prime Minister. Of course we should understand how we got to that stage that she was a Prime Minister. And I say that as somebody who feels the need to stand up for the lettuce that's had such an attack, because that lettuce was actually in Walthamstow, my constituency. But it was a very robust lettuce and therefore lasted longer than Liz Truss. I think it's also a fascinating example of the opposite of imposter syndrome, because there is nothing in that book that shows any recognition of the damage, and the damage does go on. And those of us with mortgages that were hit by that budget will know that damage will go on for a long, long time. So maybe the best thing that can come out of it is a new word. If the opposite to imposter syndrome is trustfidence.
I think I did ask her whether she suffered from imposter syndrome, and she was absolutely adamant that she never has, ever.
Trustfidence, that's what it is.
Right.
Overconfidence without any foundation whatsoever.
I think we've done enough Liz Truss. Let's move on to another text question from James. With the government bringing in new Brexit checks, is now the time to admit it has been bad for trade? So glad I went on to the next question. Rachel.
Oh, you promised us a completely different question.
No, there's another one to come.
Oh, I see.
No, he did say it was a joke topic.
That's very silly. Well, we won't get to joke parties, etc.
Oh, you've been a minister in a number of departments. Have you been in the trade department?
No, but I was a transport minister when we were sorting out all the Brexit arrangements. And I remember at that time, everyone said, oh, Brexit's a disaster and you're going to have queues at Dover and it will just be all snarled up. And on the day, what happened? that the only queues were BBC and other journalists of respected outlets going to see what queues there were. There were no queues because we'd done all the planning, we had all the work, and trade was flowing. But, there are some people who do suffer from Brexit derangement syndrome. It's worse than long COVID. They can't accept that we had a democratic vote in this country offered to them by the Conservatives. We got Brexit done. We broke the logjam. Every other party voted against it. Other parties want to take us back in again. Honestly, aren't we sick of that debate?
It's perfectly reasonable to ask the question in a week when new checks are coming in imposed by our government, which will cost British business quite a lot of money.
No. That's not the way to look at it. Brexit is a process. There's changes to arrangements. We get them through, and ultimately what we're seeing at the moment is we are punching well above our weight in terms of our trade and our exports. We are growing faster than many other nations in terms of economic growth and in terms of trade.
It is true. We've become the fourth biggest exporting nation in the world. That's obviously a good thing.
Yes.
But if you run a delicatessen in Redditch and you are now faced with bills of up to £145 every time you import food from Italy to sell to your customers, you're going to pass that on to your customers, aren't you?
So businesses in Redditch, and I speak to them regularly and elsewhere, yes, there are some specific sets of arrangements, which is why the government ministers have listened to businesses and made adjustments and changes where, I was part of multiple discussions where we made adjustments and changes. You're shaking your head, Stella, but I was in the room where we were providing government support to businesses and to all the different agencies that need to do this. We are working through these arrangements.
We're talking about
1 minute for each of you, I'm
afraid. We're talking about two different things, Rachel. The border operating model that's coming in 12 days' time is going to cause inflation. That's not my words, that's the government's own admission. Whether you talk to the British Chamber... Rachel, can I finish, please?
Yes,
Whether you talk to the British Chamber of Commerce, the Cold Chain Federation, it's not just delis, it's corner shops, it's anybody who buys in bulk. There is going to be a massive charge on every single lorry coming in.
Those charges will come in 3 weeks. We've had before
Rachel,
the referendum.
I listened to you.
Everybody said...
Rachel, please, we're nearly at the end of the programme. I do need to let everybody else have a say. I am
listening to British business. They are horrified about this charge. We import about a third of our food from Europe. It is going to lead to food price increases and food shortages.
Do you want to go back into the European Union?
Because I don't think we need to do this. That's
not the question. And given that we've only got 2 or 3 minutes to go, we're not going to answer that question. Yeah. Luke.
Well, I think there's no doubt if you look at any of the polling, talk to people in focus groups, Leave voters in particular are disappointed with the way that Brexit has turned out. That doesn't mean that they want to go back in, but they don't think that the best job has been done of navigating Brexit. Now, some of that, of course, is, that people say the government had the pandemic, they had other things to deal with, but there is a feeling it hasn't been done well. At the same time, those same voters and Leave and Remain alike, you talk to them about the idea of revisiting Brexit debates and they sort of look at you with horror, the idea of going back to talking about Brexit again. So I think most voters want Brexit to be done better, but for it to be sort of seen and not heard, if that makes sense.
Tim?
Well, no surprise from my position to think that I thought it was a complete disaster. I think there's just one sentence that demonstrates what disaster it was. The Bank of England said at the time that this would cost 4% to our GDP. Nobody has altered that view. If we hadn't gone into Brexit, we would be 4% better off. Now, 4% of our GDP is a huge amount of money, and that has been the cost of Brexit, which has not been recovered by anything.
I think it was 4% by 2026.
Yes.
The border model doesn't need to happen. We don't need to do it like this, and it's going to cost British families. I am going to do my hardest best to vote against it and try and stop it, because in a cost of living crisis, pushing up inflation is insane.
So it's all about you have to be for something as well.
We're going to go on to our fun question because otherwise we're going to be very late, and it's from Katrina in Leicester. After Donald Trump appeared to doze off at his own trial the other day, what's the most embarrassing or shocking time you've drifted off? Now, Luke, are you too young to have this happen to you?
No, I have one particularly painful experience, which was, it was a while ago now, but I'd had a long week at work, lots of late nights, and it was a date I really should have cancelled. And unfortunately, there was just a moment when they nipped to the loo at dinner when I just slightly nodded off and they came back and tapped me on the shoulder and woke up. Hasn't happened since, but it was slightly embarrassing.
Stella?
I can tell you the last time I fell asleep in public, which was in the cinema watching Kung Fu Panda 4, and I was very nice and cosy until my daughter leaned over and pushed me very hard on the chest and said, "Mummy, don't miss the film."
So it's okay for children to hit their parents then. That's the lesson of that story. Tim?
Very straightforward, lengthy lunch, meeting in the House of Lords in the full panoply of the chamber, dozed off to sleep, and 2 of my colleagues had to nudge me to wake me up.
Rachel?
Oh my goodness! I mean, I must confess, I do have perfected the art of falling asleep while sitting up with my eyes open.
Really? How can you sleep with your eyes open? Is that even possible?
I think I feel like it is, and I feel like I've done it in some particularly very boring, lengthy meetings.
Shall I make a confession, which I've never admitted on the radio before? During COVID, when I was broadcasting from home, West Ham were playing, and the half-time whistle went at 6:45. So I thought, well, that's okay. I can just go into the bedroom, sit down in front of the microphone. Unfortunately, I fell asleep during half-time, and I woke up at 7:10, 10 minutes after the programme had started. Tom Swarbrick was a hero, but to this day, until now, no one has known that story.
Justice for Tom.
I feel it's 3 years ago that I can't be held responsible for that.
Justice for Tom. He should have got extra
beyond
pay.
the statute of limitations.
I think we all made out that I'd locked myself out of the house at the time. And on that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you
Rachel, call the
Monday's cross-question panel includes the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the Financial Times chief political commentator Robert Shrimsley. Thank you to all 4 of you for coming in today. It's been quite an entertaining and little feisty one tonight, but that's always good. Now, what are we doing after 9 o'clock? I've completely forgotten. I might as well have gone to sleep. What are we doing, Corey? Scams, yes, that's what we're doing, because Taylor Swift fans have been scammed out of apparently millions of pounds of money. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to ask you, have you been scammed? If so, how? And are you confident that it could never happen again? And do you think that the government really needs to look at the laws around scamming and make the penalties much greater to try and prevent people from even doing these scams? 0345 6060 973. That was a smooth link, wasn't it?